All right, welcome back, Vendetta Sports Fantasy Show. I know I said that during the trivia show, but this is actually fantasy football here. Cayne Lander, Scott Logush, Andrew Zucker, myself, Trey Daubert. Today, we are going to be talking about Matthew Berry's love-hate column. We're going to do some takeaways for that. But first, unless we have any opening remarks here, we're going to jump into some news. We have not talked about this yet, but Lamar Miller has signed with the Patriots. So we will go around and, Cayne, does this change maybe your fantasy outlook for any of the Patriots running backs? Can Lamar Miller be the lead back? Does it affect Sony Michel? What are your thoughts here with Miller going to the Pats?
As a Patriots fan, I've kind of made a rule since I started playing fantasy football to never draft a Patriots running back.
Not a bad rule.
Because you never know who's going to start a game, let alone who's going to get the most carries, most touches, or whatever. They kind of like a rotating carousel of quarterbacks. It's evened out a little bit now that, Sony Michel's on the team. You don't spend that kind of draft capital on a guy and not, make him the feature back. So I don't think Lamar Miller becomes an insane fantasy pickup. And I don't think he, becomes the same kind of fantasy guy he was in Houston. But none of the Patriots running backs really are. Like, I wouldn't draft Sony Michel, Rex Burkhead. I might draft James White in like a PPR league, just because, he had 72 catches last year. So, yeah, like I said, I don't really see too much. Maybe Burkhead gets pushed out of the rotation. I think that's the only thing that really happens. So for me, it's if you want to see what Lamar Miller's fantasy outlook is going to be like, I think you pretty much look at Burkhead. You maybe add 30 points to that over the season, and that's your fantasy outlook for Lamar Miller, in my opinion.
Andrew, any thoughts there?
I love it how one of the first things he says is, I'm a massive Patriots fan. I don't draft the running backs. It's 100% true. It's literally one of the most true things when it comes to fantasy. And even with Tom Brady gone, you never know in that system who's going to have an epic year and who's just going to have the most pedestrian numbers ever. That's literally all I got. But I find it hysterical.
Scott?
More of the same. Like, the only one I'd consider is James White in a PPR league. Other than that, not touching him.
Yeah, I refuse to do PPR leagues. So I guess my only takeaway is there have been reports that Sony Michel isn't healthy, and anybody can chime in on this. I feel like, to me, they know he's not going to start week 1, that he's more injured than we think he is. Is there any truth to that?
I did read a report. You guys probably all read this report too, that Sony Michel had foot surgery in May. Having foot surgery in May with the pandemic, not really having the same support you do, not being able to get in the building and with the same, trainers and people for rehabbing your injuries, that may play a part in it. The only thing is that when justifying why they signed Sony Michel or why they signed Lamar Miller, Bill Belichick was very adamant in saying that it was a matter of adding quality depth, not necessarily for him to be the starter. But both Miller and Sony Michel are coming off injury. So that is also something to consider. The only thing is Miller's coming off an ACL tear, and Sony Michel may not be as healthy as we think he is. But like I've said this before, I think a lot of the times players come back and they're not quite the same after, a knee injury like that. And it's really hard to be. Like I said, especially not being able to be in the building of your team, not being able to get the same, physiotherapy and stuff like that you would on a regular year.
5-second answer. I'll ask each person. Which Patriots running back in a non-PPR league scores the most points? Cayne?
Sony Michel.
Scott? Who did you say?
James White.
Andrew?
Lamar Miller.
I'm going to go Damian Harris. All right. Next piece of news, last piece of news. I just wrote this one. Bryce Love getting snaps with the first team. He has been practicing with the starters all week. Nobody else has been in there. It's been all Bryce Love. Andrew, we'll start with you here. Does this change your fantasy outlook for any of the Redskins running backs? Does this maybe make you consider more Bryce Love? What are your thoughts there that the early reports is Bryce Love looks really good and he is practicing with the starters?
Well, he came out of Stanford, and let's get one thing straight. Stanford might not make to the college football playoffs, but Stanford continuously does well. Remember, he backed up Christian McCaffrey, and look how great Christian McCaffrey is now. And he not only stepped into Christian McCaffrey's place at Stanford, he actually exceeded Christian McCaffrey's place at Stanford. All right? He was underrated coming out of it. He was a fourth-round pick by the I hate to say this, the Redskins, now football team. And and with their recent, I guess you can call it, issues at the running back position after cutting a certain player who was accused of domestic violence and now more recently accused of rape, Bryce Love going in there, I think he really not only boosts his fantasy value, obviously, by becoming a starter, and he gets more reps, more points, obviously. I really do think he's actually going to live up to the potential to what he did in college, because you don't come into Stanford's offense, replace Christian McCaffrey, do better than him, and then just fall off a cliff. That doesn't happen. He learned from Christian McCaffrey. He learned from the same offense that produced Christian McCaffrey. He is a good talent on his own and had that help of learning from such a great talent. And I really think this is his time to shine.
Scott, what do you got?
This doesn't change my perception on him too much because the Redskins, not the former Redskins, the Washington football team, it's hard to get used to it. It's a great marketing idea, but it's hard to get used to it. But because the Washington football team are going to be a bad team, they're going to be down a lot. They're going to be throwing a lot. I don't see a scenario in which Bryce Love gets a significant amount of rushing yards or touches. Sure, he can get some receptions, but you said you refuse to play in a PPR league. So what good are receptions going to do him? If they're down by a lot, Haskins isn't going to look to take the check down. He's going to look to go deep. He's going to look to try to get back into the game. And that's where I see Bryce Love's fantasy value fall off.
Cayne, we talked about this on our last show.
Yeah.
Thoughts changed here?
So, I mean, I don't know if it's really changed. What we said in our last fantasy show was mostly that it wasn't that Bryce Love was going to be good or bad, just necessarily that he was going to be sort of the X factor. Like what happened to Bryce Love dictates what happens, I think, to the other, two major running backs on the roster. I think that, like we said, he's probably your best option in terms of, a prototypical running back, sort of, the downhill guy, him and Adrian Peterson. But I mean, Adrian Peterson, it's no secret. Who knows how many more carries? Who knows how much more punishment his body can actually take, just being so old. And Antonio Gibson is not necessarily your traditional running back. So, I mean, I don't know if it changes, but like Scott said, it's a bad football team. So I don't know if he's going to really become any more than than we thought he was going to become anyway. And at least this year, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in Washington before they have sort of the infrastructure to support a major fantasy running back. And like I said, I think a big part of running back production nowadays is in the receiving game. And I don't think that Bryce Love is that guy. I don't think he's really ever been that guy. And so I think a lot of that production receiving wise will come from Antonio Gibson.
My takeaway is pretty much the same, but it's only because I've kind of been on this, which is Antonio Gibson is a gadget guy. If you want to draft him, good luck with poor man's Tony Pollard. Like this idea that we are going to pretend that a guy that had 35 career touches at Memphis is better than a guy that placed second in the Heisman voting is outrageous. There is no possible way Antonio Gibson is better than Bryce Love if Bryce Love is healthy. If Bryce Love is healthy, I don't see any reason why he can't carve out a major role in the offense. Adrian Peterson will get his touches, but if you're going to ask me if it's Gibson or Love, I'm going to take a flyer on. I think it's easy Love.
See, I don't disagree. I just think that Antonio Gibson's a little more versatile, and I think they're going to try to use that no matter what. Especially in Scott Turner's offense, I think that fits really well with his offense. So I mean, I said before we talked about it that I thought if I had to choose a starter week 1, it would definitely be Adrian Peterson. I guess I was wrong. It's Bryce Love, but Bryce Love is the same kind of dude, right? But Antonio Gibson kind of brings something to the table that no other running back on that roster now, with Darius Geis gone, really brings to the table. So
You mean you don't like Peyton Barber?
No, not a big Peyton Barber guy.
All right, so we're going to get into the main segment here, which is Matthew Berry released his love-hate column for 2020. This is basically players that he thinks you can either get at a value that he likes or players that are being really overdrafted. So we'll start with Scott here. What is your first takeaway to his column?
My first is he's too high on Jared Goff. Like, he's saying Goff isn't QB 20, but when you look at last year, how can he not be QB 20? Like, how can he be better? He's saying that Goff finished 16th in touchdowns and that he was incredibly unlucky in that area. I don't think it's a matter of being unlucky. I think it's a matter of Sean McVay running out of plays to hide how bad Jared Goff really is. He had the 4th most passing yards per game and the 3rd most attempts per game, but only 16th in touchdowns. When you throw that amount of passes, you're expected to produce a higher rate of touchdowns. Jared Goff can't do that, and it's because Sean McVay is running out of plays to mask all the flaws in Jared Goff's game.
I totally agree with you, and we'll shift this over to anybody else if they have any thoughts here. But I actually think Jared Goff led the league in attempts. I'll have to go back and double check, but he only had – I think he had over 600 attempts. That's not being unlucky. You know, like, this isn't a guy that didn't have opportunities. He had plenty of throwing opportunities, and he didn't get it done. So to me, I don't see how Goff was unlucky if you're throwing the ball 600 times and you're not putting the ball in the back of the end zone.
626 times.
626 attempts. What do you have, 23 touchdowns?
22.
That's not unlucky.
16 interceptions. That's not unlucky. That's just being bad.
Cayne, Andrew, any disagreements?
I don't disagree at all, actually. I just think I kind of agree with what you said in that Slack message where McVay is starting to run out of ways to make Jared Goff, mask how bad he is. I don't think he's bad. I just think there has to be a very specific group of people around him to succeed. Like, he needs a good O-line. Doesn't necessarily need a great running back, but he needs receivers who aren't necessarily huge play guys, like big play guys, but can catch the ball. He needs guys that can bail him out. I think that he's just not a guy that's going to make a whole lot happen by himself. And, 23 touchdowns and 626 attempts. That's
22.
Ridiculously low. So,
Giving him an extra touchdown.
I think if anybody's going to be able to make him look good again, it's Sean McVay, but I don't think the Rams are that good of a football team this year. I think they kind of
They got hammered in free agency.
Yeah, and they kind of they don't have really that much cap space left. A lot of big contracts they're giving out, and or they're going to have to give out. And, it's the same thing I say about Kansas City. It's the same thing I say about Super Bowl winning teams. You get the best production out of great players when they're still on their rookie contract. And that's how you build a championship team with all these great players is you have them on their rookie contract. What are the Chiefs going to do when they have to, sign Tyreek, and now that they've signed Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones? What are they going to do when they have to sign Tyrann Mathieu? What are they going to do when they have to sign all of these big names to their roster? How are they going to keep that together? And the answer is they're not. They can't. So I think it's kind of the same thing happening in LA right now.
Yeah, my concern with Jared Goff has been the same thing that I said when he played in college. He does not have the ability to play fast. If his first read is not there, he is not a good quarterback. Statistically, he had the lowest passer rating in the NFL after his first target. So if Sean McVay can carve something up for him, he can do something. But, you cannot bank consistently on your first target being open. Andrew, any disagreements, or you can jump into your first takeaway here?
I mean, look, I wrote a piece within the last month. It was going over the worst teams in the NFL from 2010 to 2019, and then I looked at their subsequent draft picks. Now, the Rams never finished worst in the league, but they did trade for that first overall pick where they picked Goff. And I looked over that pick, and I said, look, they desperately needed a quarterback. That's why they traded with Tennessee to get one. And there were only 2 quarterbacks that were worthy of going first overall at the time. And it was Goff or Carson Wentz. Now, if you look at where their careers have gone since, Goff has also taken his team to the Super Bowl. Wentz took his team to the playoffs before going down, and then his team won the Super Bowl without him. So realistically, could I sit here and say, should the Rams have picked Wentz over Goff? Probably. Is Wentz a better quarterback than Goff? Yes. Would Wentz be better off in McVay's system? Yes. Is Goff as bad as you guys make him out to be? I don't think so. I think he still has enough talent on his own to not thrive, because he clearly can't thrive outside of a McVay system. But I think he still has enough talent on his own to be able to carry a capable and stable offense. It doesn't help that the Rams jetson Todd Gurley. So when Goff breaks down in the upcoming season and McVay can't help him out a little bit, he doesn't have as solid a running back as Gurley to rely upon. But I think you guys are selling Goff just a bit short.
Andrew, what is your first takeaway here to the column?
Well, I'm looking at it, and I see quarterbacks I hate in 2020. Aaron Rodgers. I don't care if Aaron Rodgers is 97 being wheeled onto the field in a wheelchair with an IV bag.
Okay.
I don't want to ever hear Aaron Rodgers slander, especially quarterbacks I hate. That's just – he starts off by saying he's an amazing real-life NFL QB. He's going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. And as Stephen A. says, he's a bad man.
Okay.
Aaron Rodgers is a bad man. I don't care how few weapons he has, how many weapons he has, 17 clavicle injuries, 14 different beautiful girlfriends that he's dumping, a brother on The Bachelor who he doesn't talk to, but shares his personal secrets. I don't care about any of that. Aaron Rodgers is a QB that even at his current age, I trade for in Madden. Even with his massive contract and his declining stats, I trade for him because Aaron Rodgers just has that it thing, that it factor. He finds ways to win. When healthy, he finds ways to win. He takes over the game. He controls it. And he's Aaron Rodgers. And the fact that he's the first person on the list of QBs Matthew Berry hates in 2020, I find absolute garbage and slanderous.
There's 2 sides of the coin on this one. The first is they didn't give him any help. Matt LaFleur clearly wants to run the football. They drafted another running back because he wants to run the football. And I think Rodgers had 24, 25 touchdowns last year. 26, which is not Aaron Rodgers typically. But the other side of the coin is that motherfucker's going to be pissed. What if he comes out for blood this year and kills everybody? So, Scott, Cayne, where do you guys sit on it?
Cayne, you can go first.
So that was actually one of the things I completely agreed with in the article. I think that let's be real about this. Aaron Rodgers is a bit of a bitch. Kind of always has been. And so, I mean, you're saying, oh, he's out for blood this year. What if
I'm saying there's an argument on each side. There's absolutely an argument on each side.
I'm saying he probably acts like a bitch and just like doesn't have his heart in it, or doesn't really buy in. I think there's clearly some issues. There's clearly some issues with Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, partially because Matt LaFleur basically gave Aaron a big middle finger and said, hey, we're going to draft a quarterback in the first round, even though like 24 hours before that, Aaron Rodgers was like, hey, we're kind of in a Super Bowl window right now. You could get us an elite receiver, but I guess you're going to go a quarterback that's not going to play for 4 years now, even though I'm telling you not to. And if that wasn't enough, then with their second round pick, they decided to draft a running back when running back was probably the second best position on their offense last year. So I mean, I think on the field, you're right. Aaron Rodgers is usually good, except for the fact that last season from week 9, he averaged just 1.3 passing touchdowns and 209.8 passing yards per game. So he might be a great quarterback, but he was useless in fantasy for like almost half the season last year. Partially because, like Trey said, I think LaFleur clearly wants to run the ball. That's why he, already had a legit running back, and now he wanted another legit running back instead of drafting a receiver. Even though I thought that receiver was probably the Packers' number one position of need in the draft. But I think just off the field, there's going to be a lot of issues. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is the kind of guy that, likes to have it any other way but his. And I think we'll definitely see that on the field this year, which shouldn't happen because at the end of the day, everybody in the NFL is a grown-ass man and should probably just be able to get over it. But I think Aaron Rodgers is a bit of a diva, and I think that'll definitely show this year.
Scott, do you have anything?
Aaron Rodgers has been in decline since 2016, in which he threw for 4,428 yards, 40 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. 2017, he shattered his collarbone, so we're just going to take that out of it, be fair to everyone. 2018, 4,442 yards, 25 touchdowns, 2 picks, and then last year, 2019, 26 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, barely over 4,000 yards. But also, here's the thing of last year. He had 3 games without a passing touchdown. Against the Oakland Raiders, he had 5 passing touchdowns. So, and look, I don't want to grill Alex and his team when he's not here, but that Raiders defense stunk last year. Like, can we just be honest? That team absolutely sucked last year. So if you take that out of it, he hardly is over 20 touchdowns. Like I said, 3 games without a passing touchdown. And also, the team's not much better. The offensive line has gotten worse, and Aaron Rodgers loves to hold on to the ball. That's where he makes a lot of highlight plays, but that's also how he gets sacked. And Brian Bulaga is out. He was a great right tackle for them. Aaron Rodgers has just been in decline for the past 3 years. His supporting cast hasn't gone any better. If anything, it's gone worse. He's not going to be a great fantasy quarterback. He's not that guy. He's not that bad man anymore. Like, we can see that on, like, a couple given plays, but that's not the norm anymore. That's just not who he is.
Here's where I kind of stand on it. And in my league, I think it kind of represents what Matthew Berry's talking about. In my fantasy draft, Aaron Rodgers went for $52. I got Deshaun Watson for $50.
Fuck this.
Give me Deshaun Watson for $2 less every single day of the week. Russell Wilson went for $8 less. I think there's a perception out there that Rodgers is going to throw for like 40 touchdowns this year because there are a lot of people that draft him that way. So while I don't necessarily think like, oh my God, Aaron Rodgers like fucking sucks, but there's a lot of quarterbacks, especially ones with rushing potential that's going to get me some rushing touchdowns that I'd rather have.
Aaron Rodgers will not be the best fantasy quarterback in his division.
I'd also like to point out that, I mean, I know this doesn't really have to do, I guess, with fantasy a lot, but just the further point of Aaron Rodgers declining. I mean, you said that he finds ways to win games. I mean, I'd hate to, rain in your parade a little bit, but he hasn't won a Super Bowl since when?
2009. Not 09.
Hey, they went 13-3 last year, though. That's pretty good.
Yeah, but guess what? They got robbed by the 49ers twice.
If you win the Super Bowl, nobody cares. I'm a Patriots fan. I know that pain.
Hey, I'm a big if you're not first, you're last guy.
Yeah. Ricky Bobby.
I was about to say.
I mean, like I said, it's all fine and good if you go 16-0, but at the end of the day, people still remember the Giants.
That ring,
right?
You remember how crushed he was when he says it to his dad at the end of the movie, and his dad's like, "I was high." That's so stupid. If you're not first, you're last. I was high. It makes no sense. Oh man.
What the hell, Dad? I've literally lived my whole life off of that. What a great movie.
So who didn't go yet? Scott, did you go?
Yeah, I went first.
Yeah, Cayne, you're up then.
Well, one of my takeaways, I think, from Barry's article is that Terry McLaurin is going to be way, way overvalued. I think that the way Matt Barry's talking about him here is like he's going to be, a number one receiver or even like a number two receiver, which I don't really think on any fantasy team is the right value for him. And I think he's going to get drafted way higher. The reality is last year he played on a team with very few receiving targets, like legitimate receiving targets. And I think with what was going on at quarterback last season in Washington was usually when you have a young quarterback or a bad quarterback, they don't like to spread the ball often. Hence the fact why Terry McLaurin had like 95 targets or something last year, which was the most by a mile on that team. Even despite that, he only made 58 catches, which is 62% of the time he was targeted. He actually made a catch. Pretty pedestrian numbers throughout the league. Hopkins had 69%. Kittle had 79%. Edelman had 65. Tyree 65. And Larry Fitzgerald, who's still viewed as one of the most reliable targets in the league, had 68. He only had 919 yards. So why people see him as an elite fantasy threat is beyond me, especially considering the fact that more than likely this year, you're probably going to see the same kind of thing. I think Alex Smith is going to start a few games. I think Dwayne Haskins is going to start a few games. I'm usually a pretty big Alex Smith guy. I think he catches too much flack, and I think he's way better than people think he is. But the reality is he came off of like an injury where he almost had to get his leg amputated. So I wouldn't be too confident in Alex Smith, and obviously I'm not too confident in Dwayne Haskins either. So I don't know. I just don't think the consistency's there. I don't think that anything about his performance last year really tells me, I should draft Terry McLaurin in the third round to be my number one receiver. And I mean, Matt Barry's really high on him in this article. I just don't agree. And I wouldn't draft him any higher than maybe like the 10th round.
I think there is maybe not like he's going to be a number one wide receiver, but he could be a fantasy useful kind of guy, because I don't think the conversation has really changed. They don't have anybody else. Who else is catching balls there?
Nobody.
Jeremy Sprinkle.
They don't have anybody. So, like, it's one thing to be, like, on a bad offense, but they don't have anybody. So, I mean, somebody has to catch the ball.
That's generally how an offense works.
I mean, I just think that if in terms of like only having one viable target, it doesn't get any worse pretty much than the 2019 Redskins. And the fact that he only had, 919 yards in 2019 where that was the case, I don't think he gets any better this year.
Andrew, Scott, anything on that?
Nothing there.
All right.
The Redskins are a mess. The Washington football team. It's
Man,
the
I can't
second-hand
do it.
nature.
I can't do it. I can't get used to it.
I think we need to make a rule until they actually pick a team name. I don't care if you say Redskins. I feel like we have to make a rule.
It's literally
I feel
second-hand
like
nature.
everybody's saying it anyway.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to do mine here, and I'm not going to let it go because this is the least shocking news of all time that Matthew Berry has Tom Brady on his love list.
Knew you were going to say that.
Yes, sir.
No.
This is the reason why it drives me insane. Please stop comparing him to Jameis Winston. There is a 0% chance he scores more fantasy points than Jameis Winston did this year. For 2019. 2019 Jameis Winston, I will bet every dollar in my bank account, has more fantasy points than 2020 Tom Brady.
All 4 pennies.
Tom Brady is not throwing for 5,000 yards. Vegas set an over-under this year for Tom Brady. It's at 4,099. That's
Under.
a thousand,
Under.
more than 1,000 fewer yards. Vegas has Brady thrown for less than. He's not throwing anywhere close to what Winston did last year.
You know
Now,
what, Trey? I'll make you a deal right now.
all right,
If
let's hear
Tom
it.
Brady scores more fantasy points than Jameis Winston this year,
No,
I'll
no,
bet you-
not this year. Not this year. He's played Jameis
or, no,
Winston's
no, no, no.
backup.
I mean Tom Brady this year versus Jameis Winston last year.
Okay, yeah, that's. The
I'll
bet
bet you $100 that he does do that.
I will take that bet right now.
Deal.
Deal. You heard it here first. That bet's live. It's one thing to like Tom Brady, is my point. We got to stop using Winston. Winston's the top 5 quarterback in fantasy last year. Brady, there's a couple things wrong with this. Winston, he can run the ball. Winston's going to give you 30 yards just because he's doing dumb shit and running around, and he's going to pick up an extra 3 yards or 3 points every week for doing dumb shit and running around, and some weeks he'll give you a rushing touchdown. Brady's not giving you anything on the ground. And last year, 9 of the top 10 scoring quarterbacks rushed for 25 yards a game. 9 of the top 10 quarterbacks for fantasy rushed for 25 yards a game. Tom Brady's not doing that. Here's another problem. He brings up Carson Palmer. I mean, come on here. Carson Palmer had one good year in Arizona. They went to the NFC title game. The rest of the time Carson Palmer was there, he was not this superstar fantasy quarterback. And the biggest problem I have with it is we have track records now that these old quarterbacks have not been special during the fantasy playoffs. Drew Brees has had rough week 16s or weeks. Drew Brees against Minnesota last year was dog shit. Drew Brees 2019 fantasy playoffs, terrible. Tom Brady had a chance to clinch a bye against Miami, and he threw for like 200 yards and lost to Fitzpatrick. I think there's a chance, even if things go well, Brady could have a good weeks 1 to 8. But Tampa Bay starts shutting it down, and they're not trying to throw for 1 billion yards week 13, 14, 15. I mean, last year they had to beat Kansas City. He threw for like 160 yards. And the other thing I have with this is he brings up like Tom Brady wants to prove that he's like, I was proven right here. That's never who Tom Brady has been. Tom Brady cares about winning. Tom Brady is not going to go out there on Sunday and say, oh my God, I need to throw for 5 touchdowns to prove I was right. If Tampa Bay is winning football games, he will be happy. So I totally disagree with the point that Brady needs to go out there and prove that he's a 60 touchdown guy because he has to prove to Belichick he was right. If Tampa Bay is winning football games, he's going to be more than happy.
And I think it's kind of a sexy draft pick just because, like, you saw what he did last year, and he has so many more weapons this year and so much better of a situation for him, blah, 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 blah. And I think that definitely will help him. And maybe that's where Barry's sort of falling in love with picking Tom Brady in a fantasy draft, just because, like, if all else remains equal, if Tom Brady remains equal, then it stands to reason that with better weapons, he will be better, significantly better. And I think that's where Barry, gets off making this pick.
Scott, Andrew, anything to add?
I'm just going to say one thing because I have said this multiple times in other shows. It's not all about the weapons. It's about the offensive line too. This Tampa Bay offensive line is a downgrade from the New England offensive line in years past. Jameis Winston got sacked about equal to the amount last year, in 2019. Jameis Winston got sacked roughly the same amount of times, give or take a sack, that Brady was sacked in 2018 and 2019. Brady's 43. I don't know if he's built to be able to take that beating. He's not going to be able to extend the plays. You can say all you want about shuffling in the pocket, but when it just turns to shit, he's not going to be able to do anything about it.
And I think I've said this before when we were talking about the Tampa Bay offense. I just think that a lot of those low sack numbers and the perception that New England's O-line is functional, is more has to do with the way they run their offense. It's ball out, it's get snapped in your hand, 3-step drop, quick throw, ball's out in less than 1 second. You know what I mean? So I think that in Tampa Bay they had, a way different offense than Tom Brady even will have in Tampa Bay. And I also think they did something like Tristan Wirfs is, I think, going to be a Pro Bowl tackle for Tampa Bay. And I think that O-line is much improved from last year compared to what Tom Brady had, especially considering it was kind of a revolving door in the offensive line for New England. They had so many injuries, and everybody was shuffling back and forth the whole time.
Vegas over under 4,095 yards for Tom Brady this year.
Vegas is wrong, and you're going to owe me $100 at the end of the season.
All right. Andrew, anything?
Cayne was talking about the Patriots offensive line and how it's more of a product of the system than the actual players itself. And he is, I don't want to say kind of right. He is right in certain aspects. You've seen, and we've seen certain players leave that offensive line, sign big-time contracts. Nate Solder go all the way to the New York Giants. What was it, 4 years, $65 million? He was supposed to come in and protect Manning's blindside and Daniel Jones. And there are talks that they were going to try and move his contract or to try and cut him, restructure it, do whatever, because after 2 years into that contract, he was not looking like the player who, was part of the Bill Belichick offensive line in New England. We saw Brown go to Oakland last year. There are times where players leave that Patriots offensive line and they just look a whole lot worse. And it's true. Cayne was right. A lot of them are products of that offensive line. Yes, there are definitely players who were naturally great on their own and performed to that level wherever they were, whether it be in New England or when they left somewhere else. But I think Tom Brady will definitely have a little bit of an issue this year, even with it. You can actually say it's an improved Tampa Bay offensive line this year. And when you add in more bodies, and like when we mentioned recently, we were talking about what's going to happen with the tight ends in Tampa Bay. They have 3 currently on their roster, all of them taking up pretty decent amount of money. Gronkowski, Brate, and O.J. Howard. Brate, I believe, is going to actually see a significant boost in his fantasy value this year. He was injured. He was off. I think they can definitely use him as a 2 tight end set, and he can definitely help that offensive line. Will Brady get to that 4,000? Was it 99 yards?
4,099.
Yeah, no chance Brady gets to that. But when I really do think that Tampa Bay should take advantage of 2 tight end sets to just have an additional blocker in there for Brady to keep him more in that comfortable 3-step drop back pass system that he ran in New England.
I mean, I wish
Sorry for
I was.
making you look like a complete bitch.
We're going to go to Andrew here because I started the recording again. What is your second takeaway here to the Matthew Berry article?
So I'm looking down, and you see Matthew Berry says, best pass catchers I love in 2020. And there's definitely some interesting names on here. Allen Robinson, Robert Woods, although you guys will probably disagree because you guys think Jared Goff is garbage. So why would Robert Woods have a good year? Robert Woods, excuse me. And then you go a little bit down and you keep going and you see the name Mark Andrews, who we know, tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. Right below Mark Andrews, to me, is the most interesting addition, especially to the list of pass catchers he loves, is Hayden Hurst. Hayden Hurst backed up Mark Andrews. Hayden Hurst was a first-round pick at a very old age by the Baltimore Ravens, only 2 drafts ago. And when I did the Atlanta Falcons preview, I mentioned how, to me, Hayden Hurst is going to be that fantasy sleeper for the Atlanta Falcons because the starting tight end job is his to lose. Hooper is gone. He's in Cleveland. Sorry, it's where careers go to die. It's like the New York Mets of football. Players go to the Mets, their careers die. Players go to the Browns, their careers die. Hayden Hurst is going to be the starting tight end for this Atlanta Falcons team. It is his job to lose. He is going to look great in that offense. They brought in Todd Gurley to replace Devontae Freeman, who, as we know, is Trey's favorite player of all time. 100%. Trey loves Devontae Freeman. Todd Gurley comes in there. He's going to provide a little bit more stability to that run game, which will take some pressure off the passing game, which in turn will allow Matt Ryan to pass a little bit more. And Hayden Hurst is going to break out in his 3rd year and prove why he was a first-round draft pick to begin with. I speak the truth. That's it.
I just think Hayden Hurst is terrible. The opportunity should be there, but we're talking about a guy who was drafted at like age 27. He plays minor league baseball. He goes back to college. He's significantly older than everybody. He, catches a couple seam routes and they're like, who's that guy? Well, he's like 8 years older than everybody else on the field.
He was only 25 when he was drafted, all right?
He gets picked in the 1st round, immediately loses his starting job not only loses his starting job, but he loses his job to Nick Boyle, who prior to last year had 0 touchdown receptions. He was the 3rd tight end on the depth chart. I don't think he's any good. That's my problem I have with it.
Have you guys noticed that Trey, it's never, oh, he's okay, I kind of like him. It's either,
He's shit.
yeah, it's either get him off the field or, oh my God, I love him. There's like no in between. There's nothing. It's, when you see, what is that, like a Venn diagram? The thing, it's like an overlap. So
Yeah, there's nothing in the middle there.
yeah, there's nothing. It's either I love him or get him the hell off the field. I don't want to talk to him. I don't want to look at him. I don't want to hear about him ever again.
This is called Vendetta Sports Media. You got to pick a side. We don't have any room for guys walking the tightrope.
He's okay.
He was a little bit older when he was playing in college. And yes, as we've seen in the past, Brandon Whedon was drafted 22nd overall by the Browns at the age of 28 years old.
Shouldn't have been drafted.
Brandon Whedon was part of a Jeff Weaver trade in 2004. That's a fun fact for you. Brandon Whedon was tearing it up because he was older, more mature, and just, he had played longer and knew the systems more. Hayden Hurst was drafted at 25. Yeah, he was a little bit more physical. He was a little bit more physically mature, which I'm sure Cayne can attest to. I don't know about Scott, because Scott looks like he doesn't actually see the field. He's kind of like the water boy. But
I'm gonna punch in first.
He was a little bit old, but I really do think that yes, he actually was worth a first-round draft pick, or he was worth a flyer for a team that nowadays it didn't really matter if that first-round pick succeeded, because they now have Lamar Jackson, they have Mark Andrews, they have Brown at the wide receiver position, they've got Gus Edwards at running back, Mark Ingram at running back. They've got enough tools and talent that it didn't matter whether or not the Hayden Hurst pick worked out. But I think it really will. I really think he comes into his own this year in that Atlanta Falcons lineup. And I not only do I think that, I hope it. And I don't normally wish for players to succeed like that are not on a team that I have a rooted interest in. But there's something about Hayden Hurst who, I want to see him succeed, because I want to root for those guys that make a switch a little later on in life, even though he was, I can't say later on in life. It's not like he's 50, but who make that decision to change sports a little later on in their prime. So I just have some form of vested interest in this. I don't know. It's one of those weird things.
Any thoughts by Cayne or the Waterboy?
I'm going to have to agree with Trey on this one. I just don't think he's that good, to be honest with you. I don't think he's as good as Austin Hooper. I don't think he's going to be that guy in that offense. And, if I was wrong, I think you would have seen it when he played for the Baltimore Ravens. That offense is an offense that has nothing but opportunity for tight ends. And like Trey said, the fact that he lost his job to Nick Boyle and eventually, got overlapped on the depth chart by Mark Andrews, I just don't really think he's that good. And I think the only reason he got drafted in the first round is because, he's a grown-ass man. And he was playing against, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. And, I don't mean to pull the whole I still play football card. But I can attest to the fact that in my first year, my very first snap was against a guy who was 23 and I was, 19, and I got my ass kicked, partly because it was my first snap ever in the university level. And secondly, because, he was 23 years old. He was just a grown ass man and I wasn't. I was a kid. So, I think there's something to be said from a practical perspective about, maybe the fact that he was drafted in the first round has a little bit to do with the fact that, he was probably older than some of the coaches while he was there. But, he's currently older than Sean McVay. So, I don't know what you want me to tell you.
Could you imagine his last year in college when he was 25 years old? I was on the college football beat last year. I covered an FCS football team, Stony Brook University. I was 22 when I covered them. And I saw there are freshmen who do play, especially at the FCS level. They play 3-4 games during the season. They're 18 years old. They've been, by the time the season starts in late August, early September, those college freshmen, the true freshmen, have been on campus for at most from July to August. So they've been there for 2 months. They don't have, in those 2 months, you can add 4 or 5 pounds of muscle, but not you don't make that significant bulk up until usually probably after your first season into your second season. And even then, you see the biggest difference from year 1 to 3. Could you imagine Hayden Hurst, a 25-year-old tight end, 24 maybe when he was, during the actual season. He's big, he's bulky, he's stocky, he's got those broad shoulders. He's been in the weight room his entire life because he played in a professional team beforehand. So he had personal trainers. They were going through it. And he goes up against a DB, a freshman DB, who's, $180. He probably trounced the living daylights out of him. He could run right through him. He probably could have just, blown a little bit of air and the DB would have fallen backwards. So yeah, were his college stats his final year a little bit inflated? 100%, because he was outmaneuvering and out physically beating living daylights out of these players. But it's crazy for me to think that these college freshmen that he was going up against were probably like this big. And yeah, his stats were overinflated, but I still think that he's that good. And he has the chance to shot.
How old is he this year? 28?
27, 28.
Something like that, yeah.
He's going to collect AARP next year, all right?
I just don't think if the guy was going to figure it out, I don't think it would happen after he's like 27, 28. That's just it's just my opinion. I guess we'll see. Maybe I'll be wrong. I just don't think he's that good. And if he was, I think he would have figured it out before he was, 27, 28 years old.
If I were a degenerate gambler, which I am, I would make a bet on this.
Do we have a second bet on the show?
No,
Man, I'm already in the hole. I'm not betting twice, bro. I don't know.
I'm not making that bet this time.
Let's go to Scott here. Do you have a second takeaway?
Well, first off, no, I was not a water boy. Cayne can testify to this. He can testify to this. He was my offensive line coach last summer. Cayne can testify. I was not a water boy. I was far from it.
I mean, sixth man, but I'm just
only the best offensive lineman on the team.
No, yeah, Scott was for the record, he was probably the guy I probably trusted the most on our team.
No, I kid Scott. I can't say anything about his actual play because look, I can't say he's good. I can't say he's bad. I've never seen a video of Scott play, because I don't think it actually exists. But I can't make fun. I never played. I grew up in a religious Jewish community. Playing football was, we threw a Nerf football. So I can't, make fun of Scott. He played offensive line, defensive line. Those are some heavy hitters. So I'm just going to continue to mess with him and his wacky hair. That's all.
Haven't got a haircut in 8 months. All right, back to the actual fantasy football. My second takeaway is that he shares
first round pick in fantasy football draft. Write him down on your boards, ladies and gentlemen.
By fantasy football, do we mean Scott's fantasy football playing days?
Oh man, no? I'm sorry, Scott. I kind of gave him that one on a silver.
Yeah, I know, you fucking jackass. All right, Barry shares my opinion on Teddy Bridgewater in that I can see Bridgewater having a great year this year because of the coaching staff, and by coaching staff I mean Joe Brady. It's not insane to say. In fact, it's pretty likely to say, and pretty possible that he is the reason for Joe Burrow's massive year this year at LSU. I feel that Joe Brady, coming from the New Orleans Saints, bringing that NFL system to LSU, helped Joe Burrow take a step forward because it's an NFL system in college football. Teddy Bridgewater has familiarity in the Saints offense, as we saw last year, and he performed very well in those 5 games. I can see Bridgewater being a very good fantasy quarterback. I can see him being at least a top 15 quarterback.
Yeah, I'm kind of up in the air on it. Bridgewater's not a guy to me where I'm like dying to have, even in a 2-quarterback league. I don't need to have Bridgewater, but I could see a scenario where he plays well. So I don't have a ton on it. I know, Cayne, you like him a lot.
Yeah, I've since the beginning of this offseason, I've been kind of a big advocate for the Panthers. I think everybody thinks they're going to be last place in that division this year, and I just don't think that's the case. It's going to be definitely probably the most competitive conference in the NFL this year by far, I think. But I just think he has too many weapons on offense, like not to be good. It's like people are forgetting that he's got 1, Christian McCaffrey, but 2, like DJ Moore is a very promising young receiver. Robbie Anderson was like pretty much the only player on the Jets that whole time, including Le'Veon Bell. So I just think that he's got, a lot of good weapons there. And I think Teddy Bridgewater is just kind of, very, very consistent guy who's not going to make any mistakes, a guy who's going to get it to the playmakers. Like, I just don't see a scenario where he doesn't do well, unless he gets hurt, obviously.
Anything else on Bridgewater? All right, Cayne, who's your last pick here?
I'm going to go with Daniel Jones on this one. So last year, he had 4 games of at least 28 fantasy points after, kind of getting thrown into the fire a little bit. He had – the other thing, though, that's kind of interesting is he had 0 snaps with, as Barry says, with Saquon, Shepard, Ingram, and Tate together on the field, which I think is a big thing. I think the single biggest X factor, and I've said this for so many other teams, is how is Joe Judge going to translate? We had that article and we had that quote from Emmanuel Acco this week about how much of a joke Joe Judge is as a coach so far. And traditionally there just hasn't really been that many coaches that go from being a special teams coach to being a head coach. Last year on that team, we were talking about with Scott. I know it's a little different because it's, JV, OVFL football and not the NFL.
NFL.
I was a special teams coordinator there. Do I think this year I could have gone in from being a special teams coordinator and been a head coach of a team? Absolutely not. It just doesn't offer you enough experience to be able to, like, if you're a head coach and you're just running special teams and you don't really have a solid knowledge of either offense or defense, I don't know why you're a head coach, to be honest with you. So I think a big X factor for Daniel Jones this year is how is Joe Judge going to be as a coach, and how is that going to translate? I thought Daniel Jones was a good quarterback coming out of Duke. I think his issue was that he played at Duke, and I think that's why he didn't have sort of eye-popping stats or anything like that. I think he has the weapons to be a solid fantasy quarterback. I'd probably say top 15.
Yeah, I remember watching him at Duke. It's just every time I watched him, I just called him Average Jones. It didn't seem like he had a huge arm. It didn't seem like, oh, my God, this is a special kind of athlete. We saw him this year as a rookie. He fumbled 18 times in 12 games. You can't do that. How the hell is Jason Garrett going to coach him up? Joe Judge, we don't know. Their defense is horrendous, so maybe he gets a lot of garbage time points. I have absolutely no idea what to do with Daniel Jones for fantasy.
Yeah. Would I draft him? Probably not if I had an opportunity to get somebody else. But, all I'm saying is that there is a possibility if Joe Judge is even slightly competent, that with the weapons they have, and by weapons, I pretty much just mean Saquon, Shepard, and Ingram. I think that could be one of the dark horse really good offenses this year. But like I said, it all depends on Joe Judge and what he does, because I don't know. I know, like I said, I know it's a little different, but I know for me, I didn't have the expertise as a special teams coach to go the next year and then become a head coach. I wouldn't have known. We would have lost every game.
Give yourself more credit. You're an offensive line coach too.
I want to go based off what Cayne just said, how even at the college level, he wouldn't go straight from being a coordinator, especially a special teams coordinator, to a head coach. And like I said, been around college football and I've been following it since and talked to a lot of media members about it. Even in college football, you don't see a special teams coordinator immediately jump to head coach. You actually usually see a special teams coordinator go from special teams to offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, whichever one they're better off with, or they might go from special teams coordinator to offensive line coach and wide receivers coach. They'll go from special teams to more of a broken down segment, and then they'll work their way up the ladder to offensive line, to offensive coordinator, to head coach. It's so rare, even at high school and college levels, where you see someone go from special teams to head coach. In the NFL, it's literally unheard of.
Because it's just Harbaugh. That's it.
As Cayne mentions,
Freddie Kitchens, quarterback coach to head coach, baby.
Look how that works.
You're not working on a specific. You're not working on any. I don't want to say real aspect of the game, but you're not. You're working on the 5% of the game. You're not working on the other 95% of the game. Special teams are a factor in football, 100%. Punt teams, field goal teams, like those are big things. Kickoffs, but it's not the same thing. It's not, oh, okay, I'm going to come up with a scheme for my offense to run an offense and lead the team to the Super Bowl. I'm going to come up with a scheme to lead the defense to the Super Bowl. I don't know when the last time was, and it's possible, where the special teams coach was the one everyone was saying, oh my God, this team won the Super Bowl because of that special teams team. Yes. Adam Vinatieri won some Super Bowls for the Patriots, but no one was saying, give that special teams coach a raise because he put Adam Vinatieri out there with the correct blocker and the correct snapper who gave him the ball. No, Adam Vinatieri got all the praise, not the special teams coordinator. You don't see it because special teams coordinators, they don't get as much credit as they should, but they're not game changers. They're not leaders on the field.
John Harbaugh is the only one I can remember that's worked out. And that his brother's a really good coach. His dad was a good coach in college.
It's his dad.
Yeah.
Forget about his brother. They come from their dad, all right?
Yeah. And he worked for Andy Reid, who makes all of his assistants good.
Yeah, like he came from his dad. So, yes, he definitely succeeded on his own. And his dad probably helped him while he was a coordinator. But, he came from his dad. It wasn't like, oh, this is a great coordinator. Let's just hire him already. It was he came from a football family.
I also think it's worth noting that Bill Belichick isn't exactly the best at making his assistants good.
No.
I mean, you can, like, Scott McDaniel, wasn't he the head coach of the Broncos and was, like, awful
Josh
there?
McDaniels was the head coach of the Broncos for 2 years, one of which was Tim Tebow.
Matt Patricia currently has a losing record.
Eric Mangini, Romeo Crennel,
Charlie Weiss. Charlie Weiss has gone to the college ranks.
Bill Belichick is I think the greatest coach of all time, but he isn't exactly one of those coaches like Nick Saban or Andy Reid or any other of those guys who have this sort of extensive, successful coaching tree that comes down. And I mean, if you have a couple like guys that leave your ranks and become head coaches and aren't good, that could be just a couple guys who just weren't very good coaches. But if it happens as often as it has with Bill Belichick, I think Bill Belichick needs to look at himself a little bit and say,
Bill O'Brien,
what am I doing to not make my assistants very good?
I don't think it's that he doesn't make his assistant coaches succeed. I think if anything, Bill Belichick makes amazing assistant coaches because they succeed so much in his systems.
That's what I mean. Like, as far as setting them up for future successes.
I don't think he cares to set them up for future success. I'm pretty sure Bill Belichick hands them a package on the way out. He hands them like a check for $5 million that says, look, go screw up somewhere else, take their money, cultivate talent there, find like the best 3 players, come back to my system, bring those players back, and then we'll work this out again. In 10 years, you'll get another head coaching position. Because as you mentioned, we mentioned all of those: Charlie Weiss, Romeo Crennel, Eric Mangini, Bill O'Brien, Matt Patricia, down in Florida, Brian Flores.
I actually think he's okay.
Flores. He's okay, but he's only about to enter his second year, so there's definitely a lot of time. But we see time in and time out, they don't succeed wherever they go. And I'm pretty sure, and coaches that have some of those amazing coaching trees, like we mentioned, Andy Reid, I'm pretty sure those coaches, even if they're going up against him in the Super Bowl the next day, the night before the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure they can call up Andy Reid and say, look, coach, I know we're going up against each other tomorrow, but I could use some of your mentorship. I could use some pieces of advice. And Andy Reid would just be like, all right, let's go grab a cheeseburger and talk it out. I feel like if you call exactly cheeseburger, let's go get a triple double cheeseburger. I feel like
right outside the Tommy Bahama store.
Like if one of those coaches called up Bill Belichick the night before the Super Bowl and said, "Look, coach, I could really use your mentorship. I worked for you for 10 years. I really need some help." Can we talk things out? Bill Belichick would just be like, yes, my young apprentice. Yes, my young apprentice. Go lose the Super Bowl. Give me credit. And that's it. And like he hangs up the phone. Like he's got a tape recorder. He doesn't even talk anymore. He recorded all of his 6 words 25 years ago. Picked up the phone. Click. Yes. What? No.
Right. I'm gonna give my last pick now. I think we've gone on a little bit of a tangent here. I'm not gonna be fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times, fool me 4 times here. I don't understand why ESPN and Matthew Berry continues to fall for the same cheese every single year. And that man is David Johnson, who has not been good in 4 years. Yet every single year, Matthew Berry says David Johnson's really good. I'm done with it. I can't do it anymore. Every single year, this man says he's good. 2017, 2 yards a carry. Now, he was hurt that year, but whatever. 2018, 3.6 yards a carry. 2019, 3.7 yards a carry. He has not averaged over 4 yards a carry since 2016. Can we please stop pretending David Johnson's a good football player? Because he's not been one in 4 years.
Wouldn't it be the most 2020 thing if he comes out this year and actually does produce well?
I'm not doing this. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like David Johnson's a good football player. Yes, Bill O'Brien is going to want like hell for him to succeed. He will probably put the ball in his hands a shit ton because he will refuse to ever acknowledge he loses the DeAndre Hopkins trade. The fact of the matter is he's not a good football player. And he brings up all this, oh my God, David Johnson's this great pass catcher. I don't believe that he's better pass catcher than Duke Johnson. Like, there's no way anybody can convince me that David Johnson is going to get all these pass catching reps with Duke Johnson on the roster. You don't trade a 3rd-round pick for Duke Johnson to not use him in that capacity. I'll say this right now. I will take whatever Carlos Hyde did last year. Carlos Hyde will have a better 2019 season than David Johnson will have a better 2020 season.
Is this a potential 3rd bet on the show?
I will happily take it.
Remember my first fantasy episode, we had the don't cut the cheese, and mine was David Johnson, and I said the exact same thing. I have been a massive Duke Johnson fan since 2016. I love Duke Johnson. I will take him every single day of the week. Cayne says he's a Swiss Army knife. No, sweetheart. Duke Johnson is a Swiss Army knife. That man, honestly, if I asked him to throw 10 passes at a football game, I have confidence he'd make at least 5. I will take Duke Johnson. I will take him as a DB, as a punt returner, as a punter, as a kicker. I don't care. There's something about Duke Johnson. He will slot in anywhere, anytime, and do whatever you need. And David Johnson is just pure garbage that Bill O'Brien is. Bill O'Brien is he's hearing through that earpiece from Bill Belichick saying, take the blame, take the blame, take the blame. Come back to me, son.
Did anybody watch David Johnson last year?
Yeah, he was terrible.
Terrible. Can't play. I don't think he's anything left.
No. I think that, the fact that I'm looking at it here, in the past 3 years, he's missed, 15, so 18 games. And, that's a lot to miss for a running back. And so the last time I remember him being electric was 2016. And, even in 2016, if you watched him, his stats were electric, but he wasn't necessarily.
4 years ago.
He just got so many touches. In 2016, 4 years ago, he just got so many touches. And that's why he had such great stats. But he wasn't the guy that I would think is the best running back in the league. I've never said he's the best running back in the league. I've never thought it. And like I said, that's, 4 years and 18 missed games later. I just don't think he has anything left.
That's like an entire, like
in
some
4 years.
Some running backs are out of the league in 4 years.
Yeah, much time change. Think about it from a non-professional standpoint. How much 4 years is? 4 years ago, Trey had hair.
A lot of it.
I was 65 pounds lighter.
I was in high school.
I had 0 tattoos. Like, 4 years ago was just so different from a non-athlete's perspective. But from an athlete's perspective, 4 years, the amount of wear and tear that they put on their body in 1 year, let alone 4 years, and to have missed all that time to essentially get his body back to normalcy and being used to play a 16-game season. No, David Johnson is just not going to – he's not going to be the David Johnson that was projected to go first overall in 2017 fantasy draft. It's not going to happen. He's never going to get back to it.
Every single year, ESPN loves this guy. I don't get it. It makes absolutely no sense to me.
Maybe he pays him $500,000. Who knows? Maybe he pays him and says, look,
make me look good.
Or look, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying this actually is real. This is me just throwing it out as a joke. Maybe he feeds information to ESPN, certain information like inside sources, in return for them boosting up his fantasy stock. That's pure speculation. In no way, shape, or form is that meant to be serious. But hey, it's 2020, man. You have no idea.
All right. Do we have any other closing thoughts here?
Check out the store.
Check out the store. I got mine on. Buy a shirt. We'll have more stuff up eventually. But Scott Logush, Logush52 on Twitter. AIZ reporting for Andrew Zucker. Cayne Lander for Cayne Lander on Twitter. I'm Trey Daubert, and we will see you next time. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We will continue to do more shows. But until next time, we'll see you soon.